Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. If you are new, welcome. My name is Courtney and I share my PhD journey as well as some academic tips that I have learned along the way. Today's video is going to be the first video in a research series that I decided to do. So I know here in the UK, especially for postgrad students, we are going into full-time dissertation writing mode. And I know the process can be a bit daunting. It is 3 to 6 months and sometimes you just don't even know where to start. So I decided that I'll share the tips that I've learned in my master's as well as the 2 years of my PhD in hopes to help you. So hopefully I'll be there with you along the way from the beginning to the end, and you will have a good thesis, a dissertation writing process, and have good grades at the end of it. So if you like this type of content, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos, if you want to follow this series, give it a thumbs up, hit the notification bell, and if you are new, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. So starting a dissertation can be a bit daunting. You would have met with your supervisor already and they've probably stated their expectations of you, and you may just not know where to start. But what I'm assuming is you already have your topic. You kind of have an idea of the direction that you want to go in or the area that you're working on. It's important that you have that. It may not necessarily be a title, and please don't be too fussed if you don't have the title, because that really kind of comes at the end of the work after you have done what you need to do. So just focus on the area, focus on developing ideas around that field first. So my first tip to you would be to write down the ideas and thoughts you have on the particular area that you are going to be working on. Yes, this is a bit preliminary because you probably haven't read any papers as yet, but if it is a field that you're accustomed to, you would have had your lectures, you would have had ideas on them, questions, anything like that you think you wanted to answer. And by doing that, it kind of helps you to know what you know already, what you need to know, but also what areas you're particularly interested in. And I think as a part of a dissertation, what really drives the dissertation is your passion and your interest in that area, to kind of find something new, something novel, and come up with a thorough piece of work at the end. So you have to be interested in it. And through writing it down, it also helps you to start to think about the direction of work. Where are the gaps in what you know, and then you're going to later follow that up with literature, but also what really stimulates you and if that is a direction you want to go in. This may seem a bit far-fetched first off, but it really helps in the long term, especially when you start your literature review and start reading and trying to figure out what direction you're actually going to take. Because since you have written down your thoughts and ideas already and maybe potential direction you want to take, you tend to read more actively. So you're not just reading literature just blindly trying to find a direction per se, but you kind of already have your hypothesis in your head or different ideas in your head, and you can see whether these support what you're thinking or they oppose them, and it kind of helps with developing a critically written literature review. When you are doing this, you're probably going to need a note-taking app. This is one of the essentials, I think, for your dissertation, but I'm going to do a separate video on essential tools for your dissertation writing, so if you're interested in that, give it a thumbs up. So now that you have your ideas, it is important to start reading around the topic of your research. And to do this, you're going to need a search engine. I tend to use Web of Science, Scopus, Google Scholar, and a few others here and there, but my top two are Scopus and Google Scholar. I like to use Scopus, especially when I'm being thorough in conducting a literature review, especially if you are in social sciences and doing a systemic review. Scopus is really helpful in terms of using particular keywords and not reading too broad out of your area. So now that you have started using your search engine, you're going to choose maybe 10 to 20 papers that you're going to read, and these are to kind of get an idea as to what has been done in the field, what hasn't been done, the gaps that are there, if you're going to fill one of these gaps, different methods that have been used to try something. And a useful tip is you don't always have to do something new, but maybe it's applying a method from another area in your field. And in choosing these papers is really why I like Scopus, because it's really easy when you start searching for literature to find a range of literature because you kind of have to diverge before you converge on your work. Google Scholar tends to give you a really large sample of papers. In Scopus, I have the ability to use specific search terms. So for example, I'm working on climate change. So in quotation marks, I can put climate change and adaptive capacity and finance. And it kind of helps to filter out those other papers. But also it has this really cool trick where you could put the star asterisk at the end of a word. So for example, climatic change, I could put climate star and I could pick up climatic change as well. So that's very useful when you're trying to choose that paper because it's really easy to diverge and get overwhelmed when you're starting out your literature review. So you've been reading these papers and you start finding quotes and you need to start highlighting different quotes to support maybe the ideas that you would have written down from the first point that I was telling you about, or anything that opposes it, or a method that you find interesting. So write those down. But when I was talking about using the notes app to write down your initial thoughts, a handy trick that you can do is that when you copy and paste the text from the articles that you have read, you can easily place them close to the different ideas, whether they oppose them, they support them or not, as something that is along the line of an idea that you have. So you kind of have, when it's time to write up, you have different sections, you already have different quotes or citations ready. So my third tip is you need to try to keep track of your work, and this includes referencing software, timelines, and having a filing system. On that note of citations and references, something that you really need when you're starting out is a reference manager or referencing software. There are a few of them. I know about Mendeley, I know about RefWorks and Zotero, but Zotero won my hat 3 years ago for my master's dissertation, and it has won my hat even more recently as I have started using Zotfile, which is the Zotero add-on. Oh my god, it is a life changer. I'm gonna do a video on Zotero in more detail, but with Zotero and Zotfile, what it does is it allows you to read the paper, highlight whatever you want to highlight, and then after it pulls out what you have highlighted as well as your comments. And the handy thing with this is when it has extracted your annotations, it puts the page number as well as a citation for that paper. And if you have ever tried copy and pasting text from an article, you would know sometimes it could come out a bit wonky, but with Zotfile, when you copy and paste the annotations, they come out just perfectly in a document. So that is very handy when you want to put relevant quotes next to a document, but also keep track of where you have gotten it from, the page, the author, and everything like that, because then later you don't have to worry about setting up your references. And I'm gonna just tell you a story that happened to me, or why referencing software is so useful. Because at the end of my second master's thesis, I forgot to add in my bibliography at the end, and I had submitted, and I had like a couple minutes left before I realized it, and I just went in and clicked on that generate bibliography, and it was done in a matter of a minute and a half, and I resubmitted. So that is one thing that you're going to need to do. So the second aspect of keeping track of your work is a filing system, or somewhere that you keep your files. So you need to back them up. You also need to sort out where you're going to keep them and how things are going to flow. And this is really important in saving you time when it comes back to going over what you have done in your literature review. So something useful to do is have add-ins on your browser, for example with Zotero, and also linking your storage to your desktop. So for example, I use OneDrive from my university, and I have a OneDrive folder that when I save things there, it automatically uploads online. You also want to have a calendar or a timeline. At the beginning, it's really important to set up a timeline. You're given 3 to 6 months, and you think it seems like forever, but let me tell you, it goes really quickly because it's summer here. There's so much to do, concerts, friends. It's lovely in London. You just want to go out. It's really easy to lose track. So you want to set up a timeline, a Gantt chart in the beginning to kind of tell you how long you want to spend on your literature review, where you want to be at a certain point, at the midpoint, etc. And you can review this with your supervisor. My fourth tip to you is to seek help and guidance. And this doesn't have to just be limited to your supervisor. You can also go to your supervisor's students. You can research and see who their students are and people who are working in the field that you're researching. And you get a bit of guidance, especially if you don't know the direction to take. Sometimes PhD students are helpful. Sometimes PhD students are helpful in helping you find a direction of work that you want. Also, another tip in terms of guidance is to ask your supervisor for maybe some good examples of past thesis or dissertations. They will kind of guide you as to what is expected, and you can just create like a template and fill in those sections as you go along. And my final tip, which is tip 5, is to be realistic. You want a good grade. Yes, we know we all want good grades, and we want to have these extravagant projects that blow our supervisors out of the water. But it's important to realize that 3 to 6 months isn't really that long. And a good thesis, a good quality thesis, is a thesis that is completed. It's, in my opinion, better to have a smaller piece of work that is top-notch and high quality than take a scope that is too broad and it lacks depth and the content needed to get you that A grade. So be realistic in framing your work, framing your thesis, and choosing your research question. Choose a research question that you think is realistic to achieve in the time that you have, and choose methods that fit your timeline. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope it gets you started or helps you if you are stuck at some point. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can follow this research series. Thank you.